Hi, my name's Marcus Webb. And this Christmas, my brother Tyler looked at me across his pristine Scottsdale living room and said, "You can sit on the floor cushion by the fireplace. We need the dining chairs for actual guests. Not welcome home. Not thanks for flying 16 hours from Dubai." Just a pointed finger toward a decorative pillow like I was his kid's forgotten playmate. I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to be useful. To make an introduction I didn't owe to a Sheikh I'd worked alongside for years so Tyler could chase a real estate deal he had no business pursuing. But that wasn't even the part that broke me. The worst part was realizing that to them, I had always been background noise. Present but irrelevant. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Acknowledged only when they needed something. A name they could drop but never a person they actually saw. What would you have done? Stayed quiet and swallowed it, or finally let them see who they'd been ignoring all along? The descent into Phoenix felt longer than it should have. I watched the desert sprawl beneath me, all terracotta rooftops and geometric pools glinting in the winter sun, and tried to remember the last time I'd felt excited to come home. The flight from Dubai to JFK had been 14 hours. JFK to Phoenix another 5. My body didn't know what time zone it belonged to anymore. And my mind wasn't far behind. I'd packed light, just a carry-on and a leather weekend bag my colleague Faisal had gifted me last year after a successful contract negotiation in Doha. Inside the bag was a small wooden box, hand-carved, containing premium saffron from a spice merchant near the Gold Souk. I picked it up from my mother. She used to love cooking with saffron when I was younger, back when she still made time for things like that. I thought maybe she'd remember. Maybe it would mean something. The baggage claim area smelled like stale pretzels and industrial cleaning solution. I pulled my phone out and texted the family group chat. Landed. Gate 4. I'm by the rideshare pickup if someone's close. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then nothing. I waited near the curb watching families reunite with hugs and laughter. Watching a dad lift his daughter into the air while she shrieked with joy. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, a black Audi Q7 pulled up, windows tinted, engine barely humming. The passenger window rolled down halfway. Tyler didn't get out. He didn't even look up from his phone. He just said hop in and kept scrolling. I opened the back door, slid my bag onto the seat, and climbed in after it. The interior was immaculate. Leather seats that still had that new car scent. Not a crumb or coffee stain in sight. A far cry from the Toyota Camry we grew up getting shuttled around in. Tyler had done well for himself, at least on the surface. Real estate development in Scottsdale wasn't a small-time game. He'd made sure everyone knew it too. The first thing I noticed was that he didn't adjust the air vents, didn't ask if I was comfortable, didn't acknowledge the time zone I just dragged myself across. He just merged onto the highway and started talking. "So listen," he began, eyes on the road but tone casual. Like we were picking up a conversation we'd never actually started. "Jessica's got the house set up for Christmas. Full spread. We've got people coming over. Business partners, some neighbors, couple of friends from the club. It's kind of a big deal this year." I nodded, too tired to engage. "That's great, Tyler. Sounds nice." He tapped his thumb against the steering wheel. "Yeah, well, the thing is, we're a little tight on seating. You know how it is. We've got the formal dining table set for 12, and with Glenn and his wife coming, plus Jessica's sister and her boyfriend, and then obviously mom and dad, it's pretty locked in." I waited, already sensing where this was going. "So we figured," he continued, still not looking at me, "you'd be cool just hanging in the living room area. We've got those floor cushions by the fireplace. Super comfortable, kind of a lounge vibe. You won't even feel like you're missing anything." I stared out the window at the desert highway, the saguaro cacti standing like silent witnesses. Floor cushions. I'd flown halfway around the world, and I was being assigned a spot on the floor like a neighbor's kid who showed up uninvited. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask if he was serious, if this was some kind of joke I wasn't getting. But my throat felt tight and I was so tired, and some part of me, the same part that had been conditioned for years to not make waves, just nodded. "Sure," I said quietly. "Whatever works." Tyler exhaled, satisfied. "Knew you'd be cool about it. You've always been flexible." That word landed heavy. Flexible. Like I didn't have a spine. Like I was some kind of accommodation they only remembered when it benefited them. Then he shifted in his seat, and I saw his jaw tighten just slightly, the way it always did when he was about to ask for something. Actually, there's one other thing. I turned my head toward him, suddenly more alert. Tyler cleared his throat. So, you know Sheikh Rashid, right? From your work in Dubai? I felt my stomach drop. Yeah, I know Rashid. We've worked together on several projects. Why? Tyler's grip on the steering wheel relaxed. He even smiled a little. Well, he's in town. Totally random. Apparently he's here scouting some investment properties, and I ran into him at a networking event last week. Turns out he remembers me from that semester abroad we did in London. Small world, right? I said nothing. Tyler kept talking. Anyway, I mentioned I'm working on this major mixed-use development project, hospitality and commercial spaces, prime Scottsdale location, and he seemed interested. I mean, he didn't commit to anything, but he's coming to Christmas dinner tomorrow. And I figured since you two are tight, maybe you could, put in a good word. Smooth things over. Help close the loop. There it was. The real reason I'd been summoned home. Not because they missed me. Not because it was Christmas and family mattered. Because I knew someone they wanted access to. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. Tyler Rashid doesn't just throw money at projects because someone asks nicely. He's careful. Strategic. If he's interested, he'll do his own due diligence. Tyler's voice sharpened. I'm not asking you to lie to the guy. Just vouch for me. You're my brother. It'd mean something coming from you. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say that vouching for someone means you trust them, and trust required a foundation I wasn't sure we had anymore. But instead I just said I'll see what I can do. That seemed to satisfy him. He turned up the music, some bland top 40 station, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. Tyler's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in a gated community that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never seen a horizon they couldn't gentrify. The landscaping was desert chic, all ornamental grasses and decorative river rocks. White string lights wrapped around the skeletal arms of a Palo Verde tree in the front yard. A wooden sign by the door read, "The Webbs is 2015, like they'd founded a dynasty and not just bought a mortgage. He pulled into the 3-car garage, past Jessica's white Range Rover, and a jet ski they probably used twice. I grabbed my bag and followed him inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and fake pine, one of those plug-in air fresheners working overtime. The kitchen was massive, white marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, an island big enough to land a small aircraft. Jessica stood near the stove, wearing a cream-colored sweater and skinny jeans, her blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail. She looked up when we walked in and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, hey. She didn't move to hug me, just gave a small wave with the wooden spoon in her hand. How was the flight? Long, I said. But I'm here. She nodded, already looking past me toward Tyler. Babe, did you remind him about the seating situation? Tyler shot her a look. Yeah, Jess. We talked about it. She turned back to the stove. Great. Just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page. No surprises. I stood there for a moment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Suddenly aware of how much I didn't belong in this space. It wasn't my home. It never had been. I was a guest and not even a prioritized one. Tyler gestured toward the hallway. You can drop your stuff in the office. We converted it into a guest space. There's an air mattress. I followed him down the hall, past framed photos of their family, vacations to Cabo, professionally shot portraits with the kids. None of me. Not one. The office was small. Barely enough room for the desk that had been shoved into the corner, and the half-inflated air mattress on the floor. A folded blanket sat on top, the kind you'd find at a discount store. This is perfect, I lied. Tyler clapped me on the shoulder. Awesome. Make yourself at home. Dinner's at 6 tomorrow. Oh, and don't forget to dress nice. Rashid's going to be here and first impressions matter. He left, closing the door behind him. I sat down on the air mattress and felt it sag beneath me, the plastic crinkling softly. I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat. The last message with my name in it was from 4 months ago. Mom had written, Marcus, can you send us the name of that hotel you stayed at in Abu Dhabi? Amber wants to plan a trip. I'd sent the name. No one had replied. Not even a thanks. Before that, it was Tyler asking if I could introduce him to any investors in the Middle East. And before that, Dad asking if I could chip in for Mom's birthday gift because, you're doing pretty well over there, right? I scrolled further back. A year. 2 years. Every message was a request. Can you send money? Can you make a call? Can you connect us with someone? Not a single one asked how I was. Not one said, we're proud of you. Not one acknowledged that I'd built a career in one of the most competitive markets in the world, that I'd earned the respect of people they now wanted to use for their own gain. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The air mattress hissed faintly, losing pressure. I thought about the last time I'd been home. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I'd arrived late because of a delayed flight, and by the time I got to Tyler's house, dinner was over. They were in the living room watching football, plates scattered on the coffee table, leftovers already put away. Jessica had said, "Oh, we didn't know if you were still coming, so we went ahead and ate." There was a little turkey left in the fridge, but no stuffing. No mashed potatoes. Just dry turkey and a container of cranberry sauce that was mostly empty. I'd eaten standing up in the kitchen while they laughed at something on TV in the other room. No one had called me in to join them. No one had saved me a seat. And now here I was again. Another holiday. Another reminder that I only mattered when they needed something. I pulled the wooden box of saffron out of my bag and set it on the desk. I wondered if my mother would even open it. Or if she'd just set it aside and forget about it like she'd forgotten to ask about my life. I lay back on the air mattress and closed my eyes, feeling the long flight finally catch up with me. But sleep didn't come easy. Instead, I kept replaying Tyler's words in my head. Floor cushions. Super comfortable. You won't even feel like you're missing anything. Except I'd been missing everything for years. And I was the only one who seemed to notice. I woke up to the sound of children laughing and feet pounding above me. For a disorienting moment, I thought I was still on the plane, caught in that strange liminal space between sleep and arrival. Then the air mattress shifted beneath me with a slow plastic wheeze, and I remembered. Tyler's house. The office turned guest room. Christmas Eve morning in Scottsdale. I checked my phone. 7:43. Back in Dubai, it would be evening, the city lighting up like a circuit board against the Persian Gulf. My body felt like it belonged nowhere, suspended between time zones and family obligations I'd never quite agreed to. I sat up slowly, my back already protesting the night spent on slowly deflating vinyl. Through the thin walls, I could hear Jessica's voice, sharp and organizational. "No, Ethan, the ornaments go on the middle branches, not all at the bottom. And Lily, sweetie, please don't eat the fake snow. It's not real snow. It's craft supplies." I pulled on a clean shirt and a pair of jeans, splashed water on my face in the hallway bathroom that smelled aggressively of lavender and bleach, and made my way toward the kitchen. The house looked different in daylight. Everything was staged, curated like a page ripped from a home design magazine. White subway tiles. Brushed nickel fixtures. A farmhouse sink that had probably never seen an actual farm. The Christmas tree in the living room stood at least 9 feet tall, covered in coordinated ornaments, silver and champagne gold. No homemade decorations or sentimental tchotchkes. It was beautiful in the way things are beautiful when they're designed to impress strangers. Tyler was at the kitchen island, already dressed in a crisp button-down and chinos, scrolling through his iPad with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked up when I walked in, gave a brief nod. "Morning. Coffee's in the pot. Help yourself." I poured a cup into a mug that said "but first" coffee in that looping script that seemed to be on everything these days. The coffee was weak, the kind that came from a pre-ground bag bought in bulk. I drank it anyway. Jessica breezed in, carrying a clipboard. Actual clipboard. She glanced at me like I was a mild inconvenience she'd forgotten to schedule around. "Marcus, hi. Sleep okay?" "Fine," I said. She didn't seem to hear me. She was already talking to Tyler. "So Glenn and Vanessa confirmed for 6. Your parents are coming at 5:30 because your mom wants to help set the table. Which is sweet but also means I need to have everything ready earlier than I planned. And Rashid's assistant texted this morning. They'll be here at 6:15. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the gears turning behind her smile. "Marcus, you're close with Sheikh Rashid, right? I mean, you've worked with him?" I set the coffee mug down carefully. "We've worked together, yes. On energy consulting projects. He's a colleague and a friend. Her eyes lit up like I just confirmed a lottery win. That's great. That's really great. Because tonight's kind of a big deal for us. This development project Tyler's working on, it's the biggest thing we've ever done. If Rashid even considers investing, it could completely change our trajectory. She said it like I didn't understand what was at stake. Like I hadn't spent the last 6 years of my life navigating billion-dollar projects and high-stakes negotiations in one of the world's most competitive markets. But to her, I was just Tyler's younger brother. The one who'd always been good at school but never quite figured out how to translate that into something impressive. At least not in a way they could see. Tyler set his iPad down. Look, Marcus, I know I mentioned this yesterday, but I really need you to help us out here. Just tell Rashid we're solid. That this project's legit. You don't have to oversell it. Just give him confidence that we're worth his time. I felt something tighten in my chest. Tyler, Rashid didn't get where he is by taking people's word for things. If he invests, it'll be because he believes in the project, not because I vouch for you. Tyler's jaw tensed. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to support your family. There it was. The line that had been used on me my entire life. Support your family. Be flexible. Don't make things difficult. As if my entire existence was meant to smooth over everyone else's problems while my own went unnoticed. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and my mother's voice rang through the house. Hello? Anybody home? We brought pastries. My parents appeared in the kitchen, my father carrying a white bakery box, my mother already pulling Jessica into a hug like they'd been separated for months instead of days. Patricia Webb looked exactly the same as she always did. Tasteful cardigan, slacks, hair blown out and sprayed into place. The kind of woman who scheduled her roots touch-up 6 weeks in advance. My father, Robert, was in his standard retirement uniform, a polo shirt and khakis, his silver hair combed back, glasses perched on his nose. Mom glanced over Jessica's shoulder and seemed to notice me for the first time. Oh, Marcus. You made it. She said it with the same mild surprise you'd reserve for a package arriving earlier than expected. Yeah, I made it, I said. Flew in yesterday. She crossed the kitchen and gave me a quick, obligatory hug. The kind where your bodies barely touch. How's Dubai? Still hot? It's winter there too, Mom. But yeah, it's warmer than here. She nodded vaguely, already turning her attention back to Jessica. So what can I help with? Do you need the table set? Should I start on the appetizers? My father shook my hand, firm and brief. Good to see you, son. Work treating you well? It's going well, yeah. He nodded, the way you nod when you're acknowledging sound but not really listening. That's good. That's real good. He moved past me toward the coffee pot. And just like that, I was alone in the middle of the kitchen while everyone bustled around me. Amber arrived an hour later with Craig in tow. Both of them dressed like they were on their way to brunch at a country club. Amber's heels clicked against the tile as she swept in, oversized sunglasses still on, a designer purse swinging from her elbow. Marcus, oh my God, hi. She gave me an air kiss near my cheek, the kind that doesn't actually make contact. You look so tired. Are you jet-lagged? A little, I said. She was already looking past me. Jess, I brought that cheese you wanted. It's in the car. Craig, can you grab it? Craig, a guy who always looked like he was perpetually recovering from a golf game he'd lost, nodded and headed back outside. Amber pulled out her phone and immediately started taking photos of the Christmas tree. This is so cute. I'm totally posting this. Do you mind, Jess? Jessica waved her hand. Go for it. Amber angled herself in front of the tree, tilted her head, pouted slightly, and snapped a dozen photos in rapid succession. When she was satisfied, she looked at me again. So, Marcus, are you still doing that contract work overseas? Consulting, I corrected. Energy sector consulting. She nodded slowly, the way people do when they're not really interested but feel obligated to respond. That's cool. Craig's been getting into crypto. Maybe you guys can talk about international stuff. I doubted Craig knew the first thing about international energy policy, but I just smiled. Sure. Sounds good. She drifted away, already typing a caption for her Instagram post. I stood there, invisible again, and wondered if I'd ever been anything else. The afternoon bled into evening with the kind of controlled chaos that happens when someone's trying to make everything look effortless. Jessica directed traffic like a general, pointing people toward tasks, adjusting napkins, rearranging appetizers on trays. My mother hovered nearby, offering suggestions that were really just criticisms dressed in concern. Are you sure you want the candles that close to the centerpiece? What if someone's sleeve catches? Tyler glad-handed his way through the arrivals, shaking hands with Glenn, his business partner, a guy with 2 white teeth and a laugh that sounded like it had been focus grouped. Glenn's wife Vanessa wore a dress that probably cost more than my plane ticket, and spent most of her time complaining about how hard it was to find good help these days. I stayed out of the way, lingering near the edges of rooms, refilling my own water glass, pretending to be fascinated by the artwork on the walls. At one point, my father pulled me aside near the hallway. Your brother's really doing something here, you know? This project he's working on, it's a big deal. Could set him up for life. I nodded. That's great, Dad. He looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. Expectation, maybe. Or disappointment that I wasn't more enthusiastic. You're going to help him out, right? With that chic fellow? I hesitated. Fikin, yeah. But it's not really my place to push business deals. Dad's expression hardened just slightly. Family helps family, Marcus. That's how it works. I wanted to ask where that logic had been when I was struggling to pay off student loans, and no one offered to help. Where it had been when I took a risk moving overseas and everyone said I was crazy. Where it had been every single time I needed support and got silence instead. But I didn't. I just nodded and said, I know, Dad. At 5 minutes past 6, the doorbell rang. Jessica practically sprinted to answer it, smoothing her hair, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Tyler appeared beside her, straightening his collar. I stayed in the kitchen, leaning against the counter watching through the doorway. The door opened and there stood Rashid. Sheikh Rashid Al Mahmoud was not a tall man, but he had presence. It wasn't the kind of thing you could fake. It came from decades of navigating power structures most people couldn't even perceive. He wore a tailored suit, charcoal gray, no tie, the kind of understated elegance that only comes with real wealth. Behind him stood Faisal, his assistant, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an expression of professional neutrality. Tyler extended his hand immediately. Sheikh Rashid, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Rashid shook his hand, polite but measured. Thank you for the invitation, Tyler. Your home is lovely. Jessica beamed. Please come in. Can we get you something to drink? Anything at all. Rashid stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the room with the calm assessment of someone used to evaluating value. That's when he saw me. His face shifted, surprise giving way to warmth. Marcus, I didn't know you'd be here. I stepped forward and Rashid clasped my hand in both of his, a gesture of genuine affection. It's good to see you, Rashid. Didn't expect you to be in Arizona for the holidays. He smiled. Last-minute trip. Some property assessments, a few meetings. Faisal suggested I take a few days to see the desert. I've never spent Christmas in America. I gestured toward the living room. Well, you're in for an experience. Tyler and Jessica exchanged a glance, something quick and loaded. I could see the recalculation happening in real time. They'd known I worked with Rashid, but they hadn't understood the nature of that relationship. To them, I was just a middleman. A footnote. Now they were seeing something else. Rashid turned to Tyler. I apologize, I should have asked. Where is Marcus sitting for dinner? I'd like to catch up with him. There was a beat of silence. Jessica's smile flickered. Tyler cleared his throat. Oh well, we have the dining room set for the formal guests, but Marcus was going to be in the living room. We've got a nice lounge set up by the fireplace. Super comfortable. Rashid's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A sharpness, a recognition. He glanced at me, then back at Tyler. I see. And the living room, that's where family sits? Or where staff would sit? The question hung in the air like a chandelier about to fall. Tyler's face went red. No, it's not like that. It's just we have limited seating at the table, and Marcus said he was fine with it. He's flexible. Rashid's gaze didn't waver. Flexible. He repeated the word slowly like he was tasting it. Then he smiled, but it wasn't warm anymore. It was the smile of someone who'd just seen everything they needed to see. Well, Tyler, I must insist. If Marcus is not seated at your table, then I will join him by the fireplace. Faisal and I are quite comfortable on the floor. We can make it work. Jessica's eyes went wide. Oh no, Sheikh Rashid, that's not necessary. We can make room. We'll figure something out. Rashid raised a hand gently. Please do not trouble yourself. I simply prefer to dine with people I respect. And if Marcus is by the fireplace, that is where I'll be. The silence that followed was the kind that bends light. My mother looked horrified. My father looked confused. Tyler looked like he'd just been audited. And Jessica looked like her entire Christmas was crumbling in real time. Rashid turned to me, his voice softer now. Marcus, would you mind if Faisal and I joined you? Unless, of course, your family would prefer to reconsider the seating arrangements. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in as long as I could remember, someone had stood up for me. Someone had made my dignity non-negotiable. Tyler stammered. We can move some chairs around. It's not a big deal. We'll make it work. Rashid nodded graciously. I appreciate that. Then let's all sit together as it should be. Jessica disappeared into the dining room, and I could hear the frantic scraping of chairs being rearranged. Amber appeared in the doorway, confused. What's going on? Why is everyone freaking out? No one answered her. Glenn and Vanessa stood awkwardly near the appetizer table, pretending not to notice the tension. My mother busied herself adjusting a napkin that didn't need adjusting. And I just stood there, watching the architecture of their carefully constructed evening collapse under the weight of a single question. Where is Marcus sitting? 10 minutes later, we were all seated at the table. An extra chair had been wedged in at the end, right next to Rashid. I sat down slowly, still processing what had just happened. Across from me, Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. Jessica's smile had returned, but it was brittle now, performative. She passed around dishes with aggressive cheerfulness, as if volume could erase awkwardness. So, Sheikh Rashid, she said brightly, Marcus tells us you two have worked together on some really exciting projects. Rashid took a sip of water, composed. We have. Marcus has been an invaluable part of several energy infrastructure consultations. His expertise in regulatory frameworks and stakeholder negotiation is highly respected in the region. My father looked up from his plate. Wait, what exactly do you do over there, Marcus? I told him. Multiple times. But he'd never retained it. I work as a senior consultant for energy firms operating in the Gulf. I help navigate government relations, contract structuring, and project feasibility. Rashid nodded. He's being modest. Marcus was instrumental in securing a $4.2 billion refinery expansion deal last year. The Minister of Energy specifically requested his involvement. The table went quiet. Glenn's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Amber blinked. Tyler's jaw tightened. My mother tilted her head, confused. But I thought you were just doing contract work? Rashid's expression remained polite, but there was a glint of something sharper underneath. Contract work, yes. The kind that shapes national energy policy. Tyler set his glass down a little too hard. Well, that's great, Marcus. I had no idea you were operating at that level. I looked at him. I've mentioned it. Several times. He didn't respond. Jessica jumped in, her voice strained. Well, this is wonderful. We're so proud of Marcus. Aren't we, honey? Tyler forced a smile. Absolutely. Super proud. Rashid glanced at me, and I saw understanding in his eyes. He knew. He'd seen this dynamic 1,000 times. Families who only valued you when someone else validated your worth first. The rest of dinner passed in a fog of stilted conversation. Glenn tried to steer things toward his own accomplishments. Amber posted photos of her plate. My mother kept asking if anyone needed more wine. And Tyler sat there simmering, his big night unraveling in slow motion. When dessert was served, Rashid leaned toward me and spoke quietly. You didn't tell them. What you do? Not really. I shook my head. They never asked. He nodded slowly. That says more about them than it does about you. And for the first time all night, I felt something other than exhaustion. I felt seen. After dessert, people began to drift into the living room. The kids ran around hopped up on sugar, and the adults settled into leather couches with drinks in hand. I excused myself and stepped outside onto the back patio. The desert air was cold and clean, the kind of cold that sharpens your thoughts instead of numbing them. I stood there looking at the string lights woven through the pergola, at the pool glowing blue in the darkness, at the distant shape of Camelback Mountain silhouetted against the sky. The door opened behind me. I expected Rashid, maybe, or even my father coming to deliver another lecture about family loyalty. But it was Tyler. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. That was pretty embarrassing, he said finally. I turned to look at him. What was? He gestured vaguely. The whole thing with Rashid. Making a scene about the seating. I didn't make the scene, Tyler. You did. When you told me to sit on the floor. His face flushed. It wasn't the floor. It was a lounge area. And you said you were fine with it. Because I'm always fine with it, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm always flexible. Always accommodating. Always the one who doesn't make waves. And you've taken that for granted my entire life. Tyler's eyes narrowed. So now you're going to play the victim? You think you're better than us because you work overseas and know some rich sheik? That's not what this is about. Then what is it about, Marcus? Because from where I'm standing, you just humiliated me in front of my business partner and my family. I stared at him. You humiliated yourself. You invited me here to use me. Not to see me. Not because you missed me. Because you wanted access to someone you thought I knew casually. And when he showed up and saw how you were treating me, he saw exactly who you are. Tyler's face twisted. You don't know what kind of pressure I'm under. This project, if it doesn't go through, we could lose everything. Jessica's family is already asking questions. My investors are getting nervous. I need this, Marcus. And you're my brother. You're supposed to help me. I took a breath, steadying myself. I've helped you my whole life, Tyler. I helped you pay for your wedding when you were short on cash. I helped you move twice. I wrote recommendation letters for you when you were trying to get clients. I've shown up every time you've asked. And not once, not one single time, have you asked me how I'm doing. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That's not true. When? I challenged. When have you ever called just to check in? When have you asked about my life, my work, my anything without needing something from me? Silence. The kind that answers louder than words. Tyler looked away. Look, I'm sorry if you felt overlooked, but that's just how families are. People get busy. Life happens. You can't hold grudges over every little thing. Every little thing, I repeated. Tyler, you made me sit on the floor at Christmas. You've spent 2 days treating me like an errand you forgot to run. And the only reason you're out here talking to me now is because someone you want to impress made you feel ashamed. He stepped closer, his voice low. You want to talk about shame? You just cost me a deal. Rashid's not going to invest now. Not after tonight. That's on you. I shook my head. If your deal falls apart because someone saw how you treat people, that's on you. Not me. Tyler's expression hardened. You know what, Marcus? Maybe it's better you stay in Dubai. Clearly, you don't understand how things work here. I felt something inside me go very still. You're right, I said quietly. I don't understand how things work here. I don't understand how you can treat people like they're disposable and still expect loyalty. I don't understand how you can ask for everything and offer nothing. And I don't understand how I ever convinced myself that you cared. Tyler turned and walked back inside without another word. The door closed behind him and I was alone again. But this time the silence felt different. Not empty. Just quiet. Clean. True. I stayed outside for a long time, letting the cold air settle into my bones. Inside I could hear laughter, music, the sounds of a party continuing without me. It had always continued without me. I just never let myself see it clearly before. My phone buzzed. A text from Rashid. I stepped away to give you privacy, but if you need anything, let me know. Faisal and I are staying at the Phoenician if you'd like to join us for coffee tomorrow. I typed back. I'd like that. Thank you for tonight. His reply came quickly. You don't need to thank me. You deserved better than that. And you still do. I stared at those words for a long time. You still do. As if better wasn't something I had to earn or justify. As if it was just something I was owed by virtue of being human. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and looked up at the sky. The stars were hard to see here, drowned out by city lights and the glow of 1,000 backyard pools. But they were still there. Constant. Unbothered. Waiting for someone to look up and see them. I went back inside long enough to grab my coat and my bag. No one noticed me leave. Not my mother. Deep in conversation with Jessica about tablecloth choices. Not my father laughing at one of Glenn's jokes. Not Amber taking selfies near the tree. And not Tyler standing near the bar, drink in hand, pretending everything was fine. I walked out the front door, got into my rental car and drove. The extended stay America off Scottsdale Road looked exactly like every other budget hotel I'd ever stayed in during my early consulting days. Beige exterior, flickering sign, a parking lot that smelled faintly of exhaust and chlorine from a pool nobody used. I checked in with a clerk who barely looked up from her phone, paid with a card that felt heavier than it should, and took the key to room 217. The room was small and aggressively neutral. Tan walls, brown comforter, a landscape painting of a desert sunset that could have been anywhere or nowhere. The air conditioner rattled when I turned it on, coughing out lukewarm air that smelled like dust and old filters. I dropped my bag on the chair by the window and sat on the edge of the bed. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling the adrenaline from the evening slowly drain out of my system. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Marcus, where did you go? Everyone's asking. Tyler says you left without saying goodbye. That's rude." I stared at the message. Not "Are you okay?" Not "What happened?" Just "That's rude." I typed back. "Staying at a hotel tonight. Need some space." Her reply came fast. "A hotel? Why would you do that? We have room for you here. This is family time." I didn't respond. I just turned my phone face down on the nightstand and lay back on the bed. The ceiling had a water stain in the corner, shaped vaguely like a hand. I stared at it until my eyes started to blur. Sleep didn't come. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the night. Tyler's face when Rashid asked where I was sitting. Jessica's frantic rearranging of chairs. My mother's confusion when she realized I actually had a career she'd never bothered to understand. And Rashid. The way he'd looked at Tyler and said, "I prefer to dine with people I respect." I'd spent so many years trying to earn respect from my family, trying to prove that I mattered, that I was worth acknowledging. And in one evening, a man I'd worked with for 3 years had given me something they never had. He'd made my dignity non-negotiable. I got up around midnight and went to the vending machine down the hall. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I fed crumpled dollar bills into the machine and watched a package of peanut butter crackers spiral down. Back in the room, I sat cross-legged on the bed and opened my laptop. I hadn't planned to do this, but my fingers moved on their own, opening a new document, and I started typing. Not a letter, not a manifesto, just a list. A record. Tyler's wedding. June 2016. Paid $3,000 toward the venue when they came up short. Never repaid. Promised they would. They didn't. Thanksgiving 2018. Bought plane ticket last minute because mom said it was important. Arrived to cold turkey and no seat saved. Spent the evening in the kitchen while everyone else watched football. Christmas 2019. Sent gifts for everyone. Received a candle that smelled like synthetic vanilla and a gift card to a restaurant in Dubai I'd mentioned once. Gift card was for $15. I kept going. Every instance I could remember. Every time I'd shown up and been made to feel like an afterthought. Every favor asked and never returned. Every conversation that ended with them needing something and me saying yes because I thought that's what family did. By the time I finished, the document was 4 pages long. I saved it. Not to send. Not to weaponize. Just to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. That the pattern was real. That I'd been erased slowly, politely, over years. And I'd let it happen because I thought if I was useful enough, I'd eventually become loved. I closed the laptop and finally mercifully fell asleep. When I woke up, pale sunlight was leaking through the gaps in the curtains. My phone screen showed 9 missed calls. 3 from Tyler. 2 from Jessica. 2 from my mother. 1 from Amber. 1 from my father. There were texts too. Mom had written, "Marcus, this is ridiculous. Come back to the house. We need to talk about this like adults." Tyler's message was shorter. "You made your point. Can we move on?" Jessica's was the longest. "Marcus, I don't know what's going on with you, but you really embarrassed us last night. Sheikh Rashid left early and Tyler's been upset all morning. I thought you were supposed to help, not make things worse. Whatever issues you have, can we please deal with them after the holidays?" I read them all twice. Then I deleted every single one. I showered, dressed, and drove into Old Town Scottsdale. The streets were quiet, Most places still closed for Christmas. But there was a small cafe open on the corner of Main Street and Brown, a place with hand-painted signs and mismatched furniture visible through the windows. I parked and went inside. The cafe smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls, the kind of smell that makes you feel like maybe the world isn't entirely hostile. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 60s, silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, an apron that read Helen's Place embroidered across the chest. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. "Morning. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I said, though the words felt strange in my mouth. "What can I get you?" "Something strong," I said. "And maybe something sweet." She laughed. "Rough night." "Something like that." She poured me a double espresso and slid a cinnamon roll onto a plate. "On the house. You look like you need it." I sat by the window watching the empty street, the mountains in the distance turning gold as the sun climbed higher. The espresso was bitter and perfect. The cinnamon roll was soft and warm, the kind of thing someone's grandmother would make, not a chain bakery. Helen came over after a few minutes, wiping her hands on a towel. "You from around here?" I shook my head. "Colorado originally, but I've been living in Dubai for the past 6 years." Her eyebrows went up. "Dubai? That's a long way from Scottsdale. What brings you back?" "Family," I said. Then I corrected myself. I thought it was family. Turns out it was an obligation disguised as an invitation. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down without asking. "I hope you don't mind." "Slow morning." "I've got time." "I don't mind," I said. She studied me for a moment, not unkindly. "You've got that look. The one people get when they realize something they believed in wasn't real." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "That obvious?" She shrugged. "I've been running this place for 30 years. You see enough people come through, you start recognizing the patterns." "So what happened?" I hesitated. Then, for some reason I couldn't quite name, I told her. "Not everything. But enough. The flight home. The floor cushions. The dinner where I was only valuable because someone else said I was. The realization that I'd been background noise my entire life." Helen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "Sounds like they've been taking you for granted. I've seen it before. Families do that sometimes. They get so used to someone being there, being reliable, that they forget that person is still human, still needs to be seen." I stared into my empty espresso cup. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just go back and smooth things over. Make it easier for everyone. Helen leaned forward. "Easier for who?" I didn't have an answer. She continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Let me tell you something. I came to this country when I was 23. Left everything behind. My family didn't understand. They thought I was abandoning them. But I knew if I stayed, I'd disappear. I'd become the person they needed me to be, and I'd never find out who I actually was." She tapped the table lightly. "It took me years to stop feeling guilty about that. Years to realize that protecting yourself isn't the same as hurting someone else. And if people only value you when you're useful, that's not love. That's convenience." I felt something crack open in my chest. Something I'd been holding closed for a very long time. Helen stood up, patted my shoulder. "You stay as long as you need. Coffee's on me today." She went back behind the counter, and I sat there in the quiet, watching the light change on the street outside. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Tyler. This one just said, "Call me." I turned the phone off. Around noon, I left the cafe and drove out toward the Desert Botanical Garden. It was one of the few places I remembered actually liking from childhood visits. My parents used to take us there when we were young, back before everything became about appearances and achievements and who was doing better than whom. I paid the entrance fee and wandered the trails alone. The garden was nearly empty, just a few other people scattered among the cacti and succulents, everyone moving slowly, quietly, like the desert demanded reverence. I stopped in front of a massive saguaro, its arms reaching upward like a question posed to the sky. A placard at its base said it was over 150 years old. I tried to imagine that kind of time, that kind of patience, growing slowly in a place that offered almost nothing and still standing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it back on out of habit. This time it was Rashid. "Good morning, Marcus. I hope you're well. Faisal and I are at the Phoenician if you'd like to join us. No pressure." Just wanted to extend the invitation again. I typed back, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. His reply was immediate. Looking forward to it. The Phoenician resort sat at the base of Camelback Mountain. All Spanish colonial architecture and manicured landscaping. I parked in the visitor lot and made my way to the lobby. A sprawling space with terracotta tiles and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the mountain like a painting. Rashid and Faisal were seated in a lounge area near the windows, a low table between them with a silver coffee service. Rashid stood when he saw me, extending his hand. "Marcus, thank you for coming." We sat, and Faisal poured coffee into delicate porcelain cups. For a few minutes we just talked about nothing. The weather. The resort. The strange quiet of an American Christmas. Then Rashid set his cup down and looked at me directly. "I want to apologize if I overstepped last night." I stared at him. "You didn't." He shook his head. "I made assumptions about your family dynamic based on very little information. That wasn't my place." "You gave me a seat at the table," I said quietly. "That's more than they've ever done." Rashid's expression softened. "I've known you for 3 years, Marcus. In that time I've watched you navigate some of the most complex negotiations I've ever seen. You've earned the respect of ministers, corporate executives, people who don't give respect easily. And last night I saw your own family treat you like you were inconsequential." He leaned forward slightly. "That told me everything I needed to know. Not about you. About them." I didn't know what to say. Faisal spoke then, his voice calm and measured. "In our culture, hospitality is sacred. The way you treat a guest, especially family, reflects your character. What I saw last night was a failure of hospitality. And more than that, a failure of recognition." "You're not upset because they asked you to sit somewhere else," Faisal continued. "You're upset because they've never truly seen you. And when someone finally did, they couldn't handle it." I felt my throat tighten. "That's exactly it." Rashid nodded. "So the question now is, what do you want to do?" I looked out the window at the mountain, the ridges catching the afternoon light. "I don't know. I just know I can't go back and pretend this didn't happen." "Then don't," Rashid said simply. I glanced at him. "My mother keeps texting, saying I'm being rude, that I'm ruining Christmas." Rashid's expression didn't change. "Are you ruining Christmas? Or are you simply refusing to let them ruin you?" That landed hard. He continued, "You've spent years building a life that most people only dream of. You've earned your place in rooms where nations make decisions. But none of that will matter if you let people who don't see your value dictate how you see yourself." Faisal added, "You're allowed to protect your peace, Marcus. Even from family. Especially from family." We sat there for a while longer talking about work, about projects in the pipeline, about cities and cultures and the strange ways people show love or fail to. When I finally left, Rashid walked me to the lobby. "If you need anything while you're here, let me know. And Marcus," he added, his tone more serious now, "don't let them make you small. You're not." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I drove back to the hotel as the sun started its descent, painting the desert in shades of orange and pink. My phone had 11 new messages. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the document I'd started the night before. I read through the list again. Every instance. Every hurt. Every moment I'd swallowed my pride and told myself it was fine. And then I started writing something new. Not a list this time. A letter. To Tyler. To my parents. To anyone who'd made me feel like I was asking for too much when all I wanted was to be seen. I didn't write it to send. I wrote it because I needed to see the words outside my own head. Needed to know they were real. That I wasn't imagining the hurt. That it had happened and it mattered and I didn't have to pretend it didn't. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. The hotel room felt smaller than it had before, but not suffocating. Just contained. Manageable. I saved the document and closed the laptop. Then I lay back on the bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow I'd have to decide what came next. Whether to go back to Tyler's house and face them. Whether to fly back to Dubai early. Whether to keep trying to build a bridge to people who'd never bothered to meet me halfway. But tonight, I just let myself feel it. The hurt. The anger. The grief for a version of family I'd wanted but never actually had. And underneath all of that, something else. Something quieter but stronger. The knowledge that I deserved better. That I always had. and that it was okay to finally believe it. I woke up on December 26th to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. I let it ring out. Then it started again. And again. On the fourth call, I picked it up without looking at the screen. What? There was a pause. Then my father's voice, strained and careful. Marcus, we need to talk. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. I'm listening. He cleared his throat. Your mother's very upset. Tyler's upset. Everyone's wondering what's going on with you. You just disappeared. I stayed quiet. Dad continued. Look, I know last night got a little tense. But that's no reason to run off and stay in a hotel. You're family. You belong here. Do I? I asked. The question hung there. Dad didn't answer right away. What kind of question is that? A real one, I said. Do I belong there, Dad? Or do I just show up when it's convenient? When someone needs something? Now you're being dramatic. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, the only time anyone in this family reaches out is when they need money or connections or a favor. And the second I stop being useful, I'm back to being invisible. Dad's voice hardened. That's not fair, Marcus. We've always supported you. When? I pressed. When have you supported me? I moved to Dubai 6 years ago. You told me I was making a mistake. I started consulting for major energy firms. You called it contract work like I was freelancing on Fiverr. I've tried to tell you about my life, and you've never once asked a follow-up question. He was silent. I kept going. Last night, Tyler made me sit on the floor at Christmas dinner because he didn't think I was important enough for a chair. And the only reason that changed was because someone he wanted to impress made him look bad. Not because he suddenly realized I mattered. Because he got embarrassed. Marcus, your brother's under a lot of stress right now. So that makes it okay? No, but Dad faltered. Look, maybe we haven't been as attentive as we should have been. But you know how families are. People get busy. This isn't about being busy, I said, my voice sharper now. This is about respect. About basic acknowledgement. And I'm done pretending I'm okay with not having it. There was a long pause. Then Dad said, quieter now, what do you want from us, son? I closed my eyes. I wanted you to care without me having to ask. I wanted to matter without having to prove it. I wanted to be part of this family in a way that felt real. Another silence. Then, so what now? You're just going to cut us off? I don't know, I said honestly. I just know I can't keep doing this. The call ended not long after. No resolution. No apology. Just a vague promise that we'd talk more later, which I knew meant never. I got dressed and left the hotel. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. I ended up back at Helen's cafe. She was behind the counter again, this time kneading dough, her hands dusted with flour. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. Back again. Guess that means the coffee's decent. It's the best I've had in Arizona, I said. She laughed. Low bar, but I'll take it. I ordered another espresso and sat in the same spot by the window. Helen came over a few minutes later, wiping her hands on her apron. You sort things out with your family? Not really, I said. But I'm starting to think maybe that's okay. She nodded. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop trying to fix something that was never built right in the first place. That hit different in the daylight. I looked at her. How did you do it? Let go of your family, I mean. She pulled out the chair across from me again. It wasn't easy. I spent years feeling guilty. Years wondering if I'd made the right choice. But eventually I realized something. The people who truly love you don't make you shrink to fit into their lives. They make space for you. And if they don't, that's not your failure. It's theirs. She leaned back. I built a life here. Found people who saw me. Who valued me. And yeah, it hurt to leave my family behind. But it hurt more to stay and be invisible. I stared into my coffee. I don't even know what I want anymore. She smiled gently. That's okay. You don't have to know yet. You just have to know what you don't want. And it sounds like you're getting there. I spent the rest of the day driving around Scottsdale, Phoenix, Tempe. Just moving. Watching the city. Letting my mind settle. Around 4 in the afternoon, I found myself parked outside Tyler's neighborhood. I didn't go in. I just sat there, engine off, staring at the gate. I thought about going back. About walking in and sitting down and having the conversation everyone wanted me to have. The one where I apologized for making things awkward. Where I smoothed everything over. and let them go back to not thinking about me until they needed something again. I could do it. I'd done it 100 times before. But this time I didn't. I started the car and drove away. That evening I met Rashid and Faisal for dinner at a quiet restaurant in Old Town. We didn't talk about my family. We talked about work. About a new project launching in Qatar. About the weird beauty of the Arizona desert. About everything and nothing. It felt normal. Easy. Like I wasn't carrying the weight of other people's expectations. When we finished, Rashid walked me to my car. I meant what I said yesterday. If you need anything, let me know. I nodded. Thank you. For all of it. He clasped my shoulder. You're going to be fine, Marcus. Better than fine. I wasn't sure I believed him. But I wanted to. Back at the hotel, I opened my laptop and stared at the letter I'd written. Then I opened a new document and started writing something else. A plan. Not for confrontation. Not for revenge. Just for boundaries. For what I would and wouldn't accept going forward. It was short. Simple. But it felt like the most important thing I'd written in years. I saved it. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I checked out of the extended stay on December 27th. The clerk who handed me my receipt was different from the one who checked me in, younger, with tired eyes and a name tag that said Brandon. Not the Brandon. Just a guy working a holiday shift who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I loaded my bag into the rental car and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel. My phone had been quiet all morning. No calls. No texts. Just silence. The kind that used to make me anxious, like I'd done something wrong by not being available. Now it just felt like space. I drove to a shipping store in Central Phoenix and mailed the wooden box of saffron back to myself in Dubai. I didn't write a note. Didn't explain. Just my name and address on the label. Some gifts were meant to be kept by the people who actually valued them. Afterward, I sat in the parking lot and pulled up my banking app. There were 3 pending transactions. Venmo requests. One from Tyler for $200. Reimbursement for your share of the hotel and dinner groceries. One from Jessica for $75. Your portion of the kids' gifts since you didn't bring any. And one from Amber for $40. Gas money for picking up the bakery order you said you'd help with but didn't. I stared at those requests for a long time. Not because I couldn't afford them. I could. But because of what they represented. Even now, even after everything, they saw me as someone who owed them. Not someone they'd hurt. Not someone they'd disrespected. Just a line item on a balance sheet that hadn't been settled. I declined all 3. Then I opened the Venmo app and scrolled back through 2 years of transaction history. Tyler Webb's, Jessica Webb's, Amber Sullivan, Mom, Dad. Request after request. Accepted, accepted, accepted. I'd never asked for any of it back. Never kept score. Because I thought that's what family did. I screenshotted the entire history. Not to use against them. Just to have. To remind myself when the guilt inevitably crept back in, that I hadn't imagined this. That the pattern was real and documented and not something I'd manufactured out of sensitivity or misunderstanding. I saved the screenshots to a folder on my phone labeled evidence, then put the phone in the cup holder and drove. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to move. I ended up at Papago Park, a desert preserve on the east side of Phoenix with red rock formations that looked like they'd been sculpted by some ancient, patient hand. I parked and walked one of the trails, boots crunching on gravel, the sun warm on my shoulders despite the December chill in the air. Halfway up the trail, I stopped and looked out over the city. From here it looked almost peaceful. Neat rows of houses, glinting pools, palm trees swaying in the breeze. You couldn't see the fractures from this distance. The families falling apart behind closed doors. The people being erased one small indignity at a time. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Marcus, this has gone on long enough. You need to come back and talk to us face to face. Running away solves nothing. I read it twice. Then I typed back, I'm not running away. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. Her response came almost immediately. Protecting yourself from what? From your own family? That's absurd. We love you. I stared at that sentence. We love you. 3 words that should have meant everything but felt completely hollow. Because love wasn't supposed to come with conditions. It wasn't supposed to require me to be smaller, quieter, more convenient. I typed, "If this is what love looks like, I don't want it," then deleted it before I could send. Instead, I wrote, "I need space. Please respect that." She didn't reply. I kept walking. At the top of the trail, I found a flat rock and sat down. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of creosote and dust. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. Somewhere in the distance, I heard voices. A family maybe, or a group of friends. Laughter echoing off the rocks. It sounded easy, light. I wondered what that felt like. To be around people and not feel like you were auditioning for your right to exist. When I got back to the car, there was a missed call from Tyler. No voicemail. Just the call. I didn't call back. Instead, I drove to a local bookstore I'd found online. A small independent shop in downtown Tempe with worn wooden floors and shelves that looked like they'd been there since the 70s. The owner was an older man with round glasses and a cardigan that had seen better days. He nodded at me when I walked in. "Looking for anything specific?" "Just browsing," I said. He smiled. "Best way to do it. Take your time." I wandered the aisles, running my fingers along spines, pulling out books at random. I found one in the self-help section with a title that made me stop. Setting Boundaries Without Guilt. I flipped it open to a random page. The chapter header read, "You are not responsible for other people's reactions to your boundaries." I stood there reading in the middle of the aisle. The author wrote about families, about how the people closest to you are often the ones who resist your boundaries the hardest. Not because they don't love you, but because they've benefited from you not having any. I bought the book. When I got back to the car, there were 2 new texts. One from Amber. "Seriously, Marcus, what is your problem? You're acting like a child." One from my father. "Son, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this behavior is unacceptable. You owe your brother an apology. You embarrassed him in front of an important contact." I set the phone down without responding. Then I picked it up again and opened the family group chat. I scrolled back through months of messages. Every single one was transactional. "Can you? Will you? We need. Do you have?" Not one message asked how I was. Not one acknowledged anything I'd accomplished or shared. Not one treated me like a person instead of a resource. I took a screenshot of that too. Then I left the group chat. No explanation. No dramatic exit speech. Just left. Within 2 minutes, my phone started ringing. Tyler. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jessica called. Then Amber. Then my mother. I turned the phone off. That night, I drove out to the Desert Botanical Garden again. They were doing a special evening light display, and I'd seen signs for it earlier in the week. I paid the entrance fee and walked the illuminated paths alone, surrounded by glowing sculptures and cacti lit from below in shades of blue and green and purple. It was beautiful in a way that didn't ask anything of me. I stopped in front of an installation, a series of glass orbs hanging from the branches of a Palo Verde tree, each one filled with tiny LED lights that pulsed gently like heartbeats. A placard next to it read, "Light in the darkness," a reminder that even in the harshest environments, beauty persists. I stood there for a long time watching the lights pulse, thinking about persistence, about survival, about the difference between enduring and actually living. When I left, I felt something shift inside me. Not resolution, not peace, just clarity. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I met Rashid and Faisal for breakfast at their hotel. We sat on the terrace overlooking the pool, the mountains rising in the background like sentinels. Rashid poured tea from a silver pot and studied me. "You look different." I managed a small smile. "I feel different." "Good different." "Think so." "Still figuring it out." Faisal passed me a plate of fruit. "Take your time. These things don't resolve overnight." Rashid set his cup down. "Have you spoken to your family?" "Not really. I left their group chat yesterday. They've been calling but I haven't answered." He nodded slowly. "And how does that feel?" "Terrifying," I admitted. "But also kind of freeing. Like I'm finally allowed to breathe." Rashid leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to tell you something my father told me when I was younger. He said that loyalty is important, but it must be mutual. If you give everything and receive nothing, that's not loyalty. That's exploitation." I absorbed that. Faisal added, "In our culture we have a saying, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You've been pouring for people who never thought to refill you. Eventually you run dry." We talked for over an hour. About boundaries. About what I wanted my life to look like. About the projects waiting for me back in Dubai, the work that actually fulfilled me, the people who saw my value without me having to prove it. When breakfast ended, Rashid walked me to the lobby. We're flying back to Doha tomorrow. But if you ever need anything, you know how to reach me. I shook his hand. Thank you. For everything. You didn't just stand up for me at that dinner. You reminded me I was worth standing up for. He smiled. You've always been worth it, Marcus. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I left the hotel and drove back toward Scottsdale. Not to Tyler's house. To a park nearby, a quiet green space with walking paths and benches overlooking a small lake. I sat on one of the benches and finally turned my phone back on. 37 missed calls. 26 text messages. 3 voicemails. I listened to the voicemails on speaker, staring out at the water. The first was from Tyler. His voice was tight, controlled. Marcus, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to stop. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Just come back so we can talk like adults. Delete. The second was from my mother. Her voice was softer, more wounded. Sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. Why? Are you doing this? We're your family. We love you. Please just come home. Delete. The third was from my father. His voice was the one that hurt most. Not because it was cruel, but because it was disappointed. Marcus, I'm ashamed of how you're behaving. This is not how I raised you. Family doesn't abandon family. You need to fix this. Delete. I sat there for a long time, letting those words settle. Then I opened the notes app on my phone and started writing. Not to them. To myself. A reminder for when the guilt came back. When the doubt crept in. When I started wondering if I was the problem. I am not responsible for their feelings. I am not required to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Protecting myself is not abandonment. Expecting respect is not selfish. I deserve to be seen. I deserve to be valued. I deserve to take up space. I read it over and over until I believed it. Then I opened my messages and typed a single text to the family group chat I'd left. I sent it knowing they'd all see it even though I was no longer part of the conversation. Said, I came home because I thought family mattered. But I've realized that to you, I only matter when I'm useful. I'm done accepting that. I need space and I need you to respect it. Don't contact me unless you're ready to have an honest conversation about how I've been treated. Until then, I'm setting boundaries and I'm not apologizing for them. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I blocked all of their numbers. Not forever. Just for now. Just long enough to remember what it felt like to exist without their weight on my shoulders. I spent the rest of the day at the park. I read the book I'd bought. I watched families walk by, kids chasing ducks, couples holding hands. I let myself feel everything. The grief. The anger. The relief. All of it. By the time the sun started to set, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but the absence of constant low-grade anxiety. The absence of waiting for the next request, the next dismissal, the next reminder that I wasn't quite enough. I drove back to the hotel and started looking at flights. There was one leaving for Dubai the next evening. I booked it. Then I called the front desk and extended my stay one more night. My last night in Arizona, I went back to Helen's cafe. She was closing up when I arrived, wiping down tables, humming softly to herself. She looked up when the door chimed and smiled. Thought I might see you again. I'm leaving tomorrow, I said. Back to Dubai. She nodded. Good. You look like you're ready. Think I am. She poured 2 cups of coffee and gestured to a table. Sit with me for a minute. We sat in the quiet cafe, the lights dim, the street outside empty. Helen sipped her coffee and looked at me. You figure out what you needed to? Think so, I said. I realized I've been waiting for them to see me. But they never will. Not the way I need them to. And that's not my fault. She smiled. No, it's not. So what now? I'm going back to my life. The one I built. The one that actually feels like mine. And I'm going to stop apologizing for it. Helen raised her cup. To building the life you deserve. I clinked my cup against hers. To building the life I deserve. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel for the second and final time. I drove to the airport slowly, taking side streets, watching the city pass by. I thought about the version of me who'd landed here a week ago. Tired. Hopeful. Still believing that if I just showed up, if I just tried hard enough, things would be different. That version of me felt like a stranger now. At the airport, I returned the rental car and made my way through security. My gate was near a window overlooking the tarmac, planes lined up like patient birds. I sat and watched them, feeling the hum of the terminal around me. My phone buzzed. I'd unblocked one number. Rashid. Safe travels, my friend. See you in the Gulf. I typed back, thank you. For everything. His reply came quickly. You owe me nothing. But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. I pocketed my phone and leaned back in the uncomfortable airport chair. Around me, families gathered. Kids whined. Parents juggled bags and boarding passes. An older couple held hands, their fingers intertwined like they'd been doing it for decades. I wondered what their story was. If they'd ever had to choose between themselves and the people they loved. If they'd ever had to walk away to survive. When my boarding group was called, I stood and walked toward the gate. I didn't look back. Not at the terminal, not at the city beyond the windows, not at the life I was leaving behind. Because it had never really been mine to begin with. The flight to Dubai was long and quiet. I slept in fits and starts, waking to the hum of engines and the dim cabin lights. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I pulled out the book I'd bought and read until my eyes blurred. When we landed in Dubai, the heat hit me like a wall even in December. The city sprawled below as we descended, glittering and alive, a place that had never asked me to be anyone other than who I was. I took a cab back to my apartment in Business Bay. A small but comfortable place on the 23rd floor with a view of the creek and the skyline beyond. I dropped my bag by the door and stood at the window, looking out at the city I'd chosen. The city that had chosen me back. My phone buzzed. A text from a colleague. Welcome back. Drinks tomorrow? I smiled. Sounds good. That night I unpacked slowly. I put the saffron on my kitchen counter. I hung up my clothes. I opened the windows and let the city sounds drift in. And then I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. I pulled up the letter I'd written. The one I'd never sent. I read it one last time. Then I deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need their validation or their apology. I just needed to know that I was worth more than how they treated me. And I did. For the first time in my life, I really did. 3 weeks later, I was in a meeting with the Qatari energy minister when my phone buzzed. I ignored it. The meeting ran long, discussions about infrastructure and timelines and regulatory frameworks. When it finally ended, I checked my messages. One from Tyler. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, only if you're ready to listen. Not just talk. His response came an hour later. Think I am. I didn't reply right away. I sat with it. Let it breathe. 2 days later I called him. The conversation was hard. He was defensive at first. Made excuses. Tried to shift blame. But I didn't let him. I told him everything. How I'd felt erased. How I'd been treated like a resource instead of a person. How the dinner had been the breaking point but not the beginning. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I didn't realize. And I said, you didn't ask. The conversation didn't fix everything. It couldn't. But it was a start. Not to rebuilding what we'd had, because what we'd had was broken from the beginning. But maybe to building something new. Something honest. I told him I needed time. That I wasn't ready to come back for visits or holidays or family gatherings. That I needed to protect the peace I'd found. He said he understood. I wasn't sure he did. But I'd said what I needed to say. And that was enough. Months passed. I threw myself into work. Led a major project in Abu Dhabi. Traveled to Oman for site assessments. Spent weekends exploring the parts of the city I'd never made time for before. I met people. Made friends who didn't need anything from me except my company. Built a life that felt full instead of hollow. And slowly, carefully, I started to let my family back in. On my terms. With boundaries. With the understanding that respect wasn't optional. Some of them got it. Some didn't. Tyler and I talked occasionally. Stiff at first, then gradually easier. My mother sent messages that I sometimes answered. My father stayed distant, still waiting for an apology I wasn't going to give. Amber didn't reach out at all. And that was okay. I'd stopped trying to force connections that didn't want to be made. One evening, I was walking along Jumeirah Beach, the sun setting over the Gulf, the skyline glowing behind me. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was Helen. From the cafe. I hope you don't mind. I asked Rashid for your number. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I smiled. I'm doing well. Really well. Thank you for everything. Her reply came quickly. Proud of you. Keep building that life. I looked out at the water, at the people scattered along the beach, at the city that had become my home. And I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for my family to see me. Not for permission to take up space. Not for proof that I mattered. I just was. And that was enough. A year later, I was back in Arizona. Not for a holiday. Not for an obligation. For a conference. I had 2 days free afterward and I decided to stay. I met Tyler for coffee. Not at his house. At a neutral cafe in Tempe. We talked. Really talked. He apologized. Not a perfect apology. Not the kind that erased everything. But an honest one. He said he'd been thinking about that Christmas. About how he'd treated me. About how he'd taken me for granted. He said he was trying to do better. I told him I appreciated that. That I was willing to see where things went. But that I wasn't going back to how things were. He nodded. I get it. And I think that's fair. We didn't hug. But we shook hands. And it felt like a beginning. Not of something old. But of something new. On my last day in Arizona, I went back to Helen's cafe. She was behind the counter, same apron, same warm smile. She saw me and her face lit up. Marcus, look at you. We sat and talked for hours. About life. About growth. About the hard, necessary work of choosing yourself. When I left, she walked me to the door. You did it, she said. You built the life you deserved. I hugged her. Thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. She patted my back. That's what we do for each other. When the people who are supposed to see us don't, we find the ones who will. I flew back to Dubai that evening. The city lights spread below me as we descended. And I felt something I'd spent years searching for. Not happiness. Not triumph. Just peace. The quiet, steady knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That I'd fought for myself and won. That I'd drawn the line and held it. And that no matter what came next, I would never again let anyone make me feel like I didn't deserve a seat at the table. Because I did. I always had. And now finally I believed it. The people who'd made me sit on the floor at Christmas didn't get to define my worth anymore. I did. And I was done apologizing for taking up space. I was done shrinking to fit into lives that had no room for me. I was done being useful instead of loved. I was just done. And in that ending I found my beginning. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with liberation. Mine was the second kind. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The Dubai skyline stretched endlessly beyond my office window. A forest of glass and ambition catching the late afternoon sun. I stood there with a coffee going cold in my hand, watching construction cranes swing lazily against the sky like mechanical giants building tomorrow. My phone sat face down on the desk behind me, silent for once. It had been 8 months since that Christmas in Scottsdale. 8 months since I'd walked out of Tyler's house and chosen myself over the idea of family I'd been clinging to. 8 months since I'd stopped apologizing for existing. The work had kept me busy. A new contract with a Saudi firm. Advisory role on a renewable energy project in Oman. 2 speaking engagements at industry conferences where people actually listen when I talked, where my insights mattered, where I wasn't just background noise waiting to be useful. Faisal knocked on my open door, pulling me from my thoughts. He held a folder and wore that expression he got when he had news he wasn't sure how to deliver. Marcus, do you have a moment? Always, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. He sat and slid the folder toward me. This came through this morning. Proposal for a new development project. Mixed use, hospitality and commercial. They're looking for consulting on energy infrastructure and regulatory compliance. Standard stuff. But you should see who's leading it. I opened the folder. My stomach dropped. Webb Development Group. Tyler's company. Principal contact, Tyler Webb. I stared at the name for a long moment. Faisal watched me carefully. I can reassign this if you prefer. Someone else can handle it. I closed the folder. No. I'll look at it. Are you sure? Because there's no obligation here. You don't owe him anything. I know, I said. But I want to see what he's actually built. If it's legitimate work, I'll treat it like any other proposal. If it's not, I'll tell him no like I would anyone else. Faisal nodded slowly. Fair enough. Let me know what you decide. After he left, I sat there staring at the folder. Part of me wanted to toss it in the recycling bin and pretend I'd never seen it. But another part, the part that had spent 8 months learning to trust my own judgment, wanted to see if Tyler had actually changed. If he'd learned anything. If this was another attempt to use me, or if maybe he'd finally started to respect what I did. I opened the folder again and started reading. The proposal was detailed. Comprehensive. It outlined a project in Scottsdale. A multi-phase development with sustainable design elements, solar infrastructure, water reclamation systems. The kind of thing that required serious capital and serious expertise. It wasn't amateur hour. Someone had put real thought into this. I spent 2 hours going through every page. Financial projections. Environmental impact assessments. Letters of intent from potential anchor tenants. It was solid. Not perfect, but solid. The kind of project that could actually work if executed properly. At the bottom of the last page there was a handwritten note. Marcus, I know this is asking a lot, but I wanted you to see this because it's legitimate. I'm not asking for favors. I'm asking for your professional opinion. If you think it's worth your time, I'd value your input. If not, I understand. Tyler. I set the note down and leaned back in my chair. This was different. Not a demand. Not an assumption. An ask. With an acknowledgement that I could say no. It was the first time Tyler had approached me like an equal instead of a resource. I picked up my phone and texted Faisal. Schedule a call with Tyler Webb. I want to go through this proposal in detail before I make any decisions. His reply came quickly. Will do. Setting it up for tomorrow morning your time. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that Christmas dinner. About sitting on the floor while everyone else had chairs. About Rashid asking where I should sit in Tyler's face when he realized he'd been exposed. About walking out and choosing myself. I'd built something in these 8 months. Not just a career, but a sense of self-worth that didn't depend on other people's validation. And now Tyler was asking me to risk that. Not for family. For work. But the line between the two felt thin and dangerous. The next morning, I made coffee and set up my laptop in the small office nook of my apartment. At exactly 9, my screen lit up with an incoming call. Tyler Webb. I answered. Tyler appeared on screen, and I was struck by how different he looked. Older maybe. Or just tired. His hair was shorter. His expression more guarded. He wasn't wearing the cocky confidence I remembered. Marcus, he said. Thanks for taking this call. I nodded. I read through the proposal. It's thorough. He exhaled, something like relief crossing his face. I'm glad you think so. I've been working on it for months. Got a team together. Real professionals. People who know what they're doing. I leaned forward slightly. So why do you need me? Tyler hesitated. Because you're the best at what you do. And because this project requires someone who understands energy compliance in a way I don't. I need expertise, not just a rubber stamp. That's not what I'm asking, I said. I'm asking why you need me specifically. There are other consultants. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I want to do this the right way. And part of doing it the right way means working with people I trust. Even if I haven't earned that trust yet. I sat back. That's honest. Tyler rubbed his face. Look, Marcus, I've thought a lot about last Christmas. About how I treated you. And I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix it. But I am sorry. I was so focused on what I needed that I didn't see what I was doing to you. I didn't see you. I watched him through the screen trying to gauge if this was real or just another performance. And? I prompted. And I'm trying to be better, he said. I'm not perfect. I'm still figuring this out. But I don't want to keep being the guy who only values people when they're useful. I want to actually build something I'm proud of. And I want to do it without burning every bridge I've ever had. That landed somewhere real. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, if I consult on this, it's going to be on my terms. Professional terms. You pay my firm's standard rate. I report what I find honestly, even if it's not what you want to hear. And if I say no at any point, that's final. No guilt trips. No family obligation. Just business. Tyler nodded immediately. Agreed. All of that. I just want a fair shot. I studied him through the screen. Then I said, send me the full project file. Environmental studies, financial backing, everything. I'll do a proper assessment. If it holds up, we can talk about terms. If it doesn't, I'll tell you why and you can take that feedback however you want. Tyler's shoulders dropped with visible relief. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you. I ended the call and sat there staring at the blank screen. I didn't know if I was making the right choice. But I knew I was making it from a place of strength instead of guilt. And that was progress. Over the next 2 weeks, I tore through Tyler's project file with the same scrutiny I'd give any client. I brought in specialists, ran models, checked every claim and every number. And the more I looked, the more impressed I became. It wasn't perfect. There were gaps in the water management plan. Some of the solar projections were optimistic. But it was real, legitimate, the kind of project that could actually make a difference. I compiled my findings into a report and scheduled another call with Tyler. This time Jessica was on the call too. She looked nervous. Marcus, she said when I appeared on screen. Thank you for doing this. I know it's probably uncomfortable. It's work, I said simply. I'm treating it like work. Tyler jumped in. So what's the verdict? I pulled up my report and shared my screen. Overall, the project is viable. Your sustainable infrastructure plans are strong. The market analysis is solid. But there are 3 areas that need significant revision before any serious investor is going to take this seriously. I walked them through each issue. The water reclamation system needed redesign. The solar capacity projections needed to account for seasonal variance. And the financial model was too aggressive on tenant occupancy rates. Tyler took notes, asked questions, didn't get defensive. When I finished, he looked at Jessica, then back at me. Okay, so if we address those issues, you think this could work? If you address them properly, yes. And if you bring in the right partners, this could be a flagship project. Jessica leaned forward. Would you be willing to stay on as a consultant? Through the revision phase? I considered it. Then I said yes. But I need to be clear about something. I'm doing this because the work is good and because I think it's worth doing. Not because you're my brother. Not because of family obligation. Because professionally, this is the kind of project I want to be associated with. Tyler nodded. I get it. And that's exactly how I want it to be. We agreed on terms. My firm would consult through the development phase. I'd be paid market rate. And I'd have full autonomy to make recommendations without pressure. It felt clean. Professional. Like I was finally being treated the way I deserved. When the call ended, I sat back and let myself feel it. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just satisfaction. I'd set a boundary and held it. And for once, someone had actually respected it. 3 months later, I flew back to Arizona. Not for family. For work. Tyler had invited me to a presentation for potential investors. He wanted me there to answer technical questions about the energy systems. Professional capacity only. I stayed at a hotel downtown. Not the extended stay this time. A nice place with a gym and a rooftop bar. The night before the presentation, I met Tyler for dinner at a restaurant in Old Town. Just the 2 of us. We sat outside on the patio, the evening warm and dry, the kind of Arizona night that made you understand why people moved here. For a while we just talked about the project. About timelines and budgets and contractor bids. Safe territory. Then Tyler set his fork down and looked at me. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Go ahead. Why did you agree to work on this? After everything. I thought about it. Because the work was good, I said. And because I wanted to see if you meant what you said. About doing things differently. Tyler absorbed that. And? Do you think I did? I think you're trying, I said honestly. I think you still have blind spots. But you're trying. And that's more than I expected. He nodded slowly. I know I can't undo what happened. I know I hurt you. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix it. But I want you to know that I see it now. How I treated you. How we all treated you. And I'm ashamed of it. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just said, I appreciate you saying it. We finished dinner in companionable silence. Not the heavy silence of before. Just two people existing in the same space without needing to fill every gap. The next day's presentation went well. The investors were impressed. Asked smart questions. I answered them cleanly, professionally. Afterward, one of them pulled me aside. Your brother's lucky to have you on this project, he said. The energy infrastructure plan is what sold me. It's rare to see this level of expertise on a development this size. I smiled. Thank you. When everyone had left, Tyler found me in the parking lot. I was loading my rental car, ready to head back to my hotel before my flight the next morning. Marcus, he called. I turned. He walked over, hands in his pockets. That went really well. Thanks to you. I did my job, I said. That's all. He nodded. I know. But still. Thank you. We stood there for a moment. Then Tyler said, I know you're leaving tomorrow. But if you have time, Mom and Dad would like to see you. Just for coffee or something. No pressure. I hesitated. I hadn't seen my parents since that Christmas. We'd exchanged occasional texts. Stiff, formal check-ins. But nothing real. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. Tyler nodded quickly. I get it. I do. But I think they're starting to understand. What they did. How they made you feel. They won't say it perfectly. But they're trying. I looked at him. Are you asking me to do this for them? Or for you? For you, he said. Because I think you deserve to hear them try. Even if it's messy. I thought about it. Then I said, I'll think about it. That's all I can promise. Tyler smiled, small but genuine. That's more than enough. That evening I texted my mother. I'm in town until tomorrow morning. If you and Dad want to meet for coffee, I'm available. 8 a.m. at Helen's Cafe in Old Town. Her response came within minutes. We'll be there. Thank you, Marcus. The next morning, I arrived at Helen's 15 minutes early. She was behind the counter, and her face lit up when she saw me. Marcus, you're back. For work, I said. But I'm meeting my parents here in a bit. She studied me. How are you feeling about that? Nervous, I admitted. But ready, I think. She poured me a coffee. You've come a long way. Whatever happens, remember that. My parents arrived at exactly 8. My mother wore a cardigan and slacks, her hair perfectly styled. My father was in khakis and a polo. They looked smaller somehow. Less certain. We sat at a corner table. For a moment no one spoke. Then my mother said, thank you for meeting us. I nodded. You said you wanted to talk. My father cleared his throat. We've been doing a lot of thinking. About last Christmas. About how we treated you. And we wanted to say that we're sorry. It wasn't right. I waited. My mother continued, her voice shaky. We didn't realize how much we'd been taking you for granted. How much we'd been dismissing you. Tyler helped us see it. And we're ashamed. I looked at both of them. Do you understand why I left? My father hesitated. Then he said, I think so. You felt disrespected. Overlooked. It's more than that, I said. I felt erased. Like I only mattered when I was useful. Like my whole life, my career, my accomplishments, none of it was real to you unless someone else validated it first. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. But you did, I said gently. You all did. And I can't pretend it didn't happen just because time has passed. My father nodded. We're not asking you to pretend. We're asking if you'll give us a chance to do better. I sat with that. Then I said, I'm willing to try. But things have to be different. I need to know that you see me. That you value me for who I am. Not for what I can do for you. My mother reached across the table then stopped, uncertain. Can I hug you? I nodded. She came around the table and wrapped her arms around me. It was awkward at first. Then it softened. When she pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. We stayed for another hour. Talking. Really talking. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of defensiveness. Still gaps in understanding. But it was a start. When I left, my father shook my hand. Then pulled me into a brief stiff hug. I'm proud of you, son. Even if I didn't say it before. I'm saying it now. I nodded, throat tight. Thank you. I drove to the airport with something like hope sitting in my chest. Not certainty. Not resolution. Just hope. That maybe slowly, carefully we could build something real. 6 months later, Tyler's project broke ground. I flew back for the ceremony. This time I stayed with Tyler and Jessica. Not in the office on an air mattress. In their actual guest room. With clean sheets and a real bed and a sign on the door that said Marcus's room. It was a small thing. But it mattered. The groundbreaking was full of speeches and photo ops. Local officials. Investors. Media. When it was Tyler's turn to speak, he thanked his team. His partners. His family. And then he said, I also want to thank my brother Marcus, who believed in this project even when I gave him every reason not to. His expertise made this possible. But more than that, his integrity reminded me what it means to do things the right way. Thank you, Marcus. Everyone applauded. I stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling seen in a way I'd spent my whole life wanting. After the ceremony, there was a reception. My parents were there. Amber and Craig. Friends and colleagues. At one point, I found myself standing alone near the edge of the site, looking out at the cleared land that would soon become something real. Rashid appeared beside me. He'd flown in as a surprise. I didn't even know he was coming. Quite a moment, he said. Yeah, I agreed. He glanced at me. How does it feel? Different, I said. Good different. But still strange. Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rashid smiled. That's normal. Trust takes time to rebuild. But you're doing it on your terms. That's what matters. We stood there in comfortable silence. Then he said, I'm proud of you. For what you've built. Not just here. But in yourself. I looked at him. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. He clasped my shoulder. That's what real relationships do. They reflect back the best parts of us. Even when we've forgotten they're there. That night the whole family had dinner together. Not at Tyler's house. At a restaurant downtown. Neutral ground. We sat around a big table. Passed dishes. Laughed at stories. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt like I was actually part of something. Not an accessory. Not a resource. Just a person who belonged. At the end of the night, as we were leaving, Amber pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, she said. I didn't understand what was happening last Christmas. I just thought you were being difficult. But Tyler explained it to me. And I'm sorry. For the texts. For not seeing it. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. She smiled, small and uncertain. Can we start over? Maybe, I said. Let's see how it goes. She seemed to accept that. We walked out together, and it felt like a door opening. Not wide, but open. A year after that Christmas, I was back in Dubai. Back in my apartment with the view of the creek. Back in the rhythm of work and life and the quiet satisfaction of days that felt like mine. I was sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, when my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Just wanted to say thank you. For everything. For giving me a chance. For not giving up on us even when we didn't deserve it. I smiled and typed back, you're welcome. But I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. His response came quickly. I know. And that's exactly why it mattered. I set the phone down and looked out at the city. Somewhere below, people were living their lives. Building. Struggling. Choosing themselves or choosing to stay small. I thought about the version of me who'd landed in Phoenix that Christmas. Exhausted. Hopeful. Still trying to earn love from people who saw him as convenient. That version of me felt like a lifetime ago. I built something since then. Not just a career. Not just boundaries. But a sense of self that didn't require external validation. A knowledge deep and unshakable that I was worth more than how I'd been treated. And I'd learned that you can't make people see you. You can only decide whether you'll keep standing in front of them waiting, or whether you'll turn around and find the people who already do. I chose the second. And in that choice I found everything I'd been searching for. Not perfection. Not a family that suddenly understood everything. But people who were willing to try. And a version of myself who knew without question that I deserved the effort. The skyline glittered as night fell. The city hummed with life and possibility. And I sat there, coffee in hand, watching it all unfold. Not waiting for anything. Not proving anything. Just existing. Fully. Completely. Unapologetically. I was no longer the person who sat on the floor at Christmas. I was the person who stood up and walked away. And then when I was ready, walked back on my own terms. Some stories end with everything falling into place. Mine ended with me learning that I didn't need everything to fall into place. I just needed to stop apologizing for taking up space. To stop waiting for permission to matter. To stop measuring my worth by other people's inability to see it. The people who made me feel small didn't get to define me anymore. I defined myself. And I was done being anything other than exactly who I was meant to be. Whole. Valued. Seen. Not because someone finally noticed, but because I finally refused to be invisible. That was my victory. Not revenge. Not reconciliation. Just liberation. The freedom to exist without apology. And in the end, that was worth more than any seat at any table. Because I'd built my own table. And everyone who sat there knew my worth. Including me. Especially me. 2 years had passed since that Christmas on the floor. 2 years of building, of healing, of learning what it meant to exist in spaces that actually welcomed me. I was in my Dubai office when the invitation arrived, not by email or text, but by courier. A thick cream envelope with my name written in elegant script. Inside was a card printed on heavy stock paper. You are cordially invited to the Webb family reunion, July 15th, Scottsdale, Arizona. 3 days of celebration, reconnection, and new beginnings. We hope you'll join us. Love, the Webb family. I turned the card over in my hands, feeling the weight of it. A family reunion. The kind of gathering I'd spent years showing up to only to feel like a stranger in my own bloodline. But this time the invitation felt different. It wasn't a summons. It wasn't a request wrapped in obligation. It was an actual invitation, with no strings attached, no favors embedded in the subtext. Faisal knocked on my doorframe. Everything okay? I held up the card. Family reunion. Back in Arizona. He raised an eyebrow. Are you going? I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to see how far we've all come. Another part remembers how much it cost to get here. Faisal sat down across from me. You know what I think? You've already proven you can walk away. Now the question is whether you want to walk back. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. I nodded slowly. That's exactly it. The choice. I left the invitation on my desk for 3 days before I responded. I needed to sit with it, to feel whether the old anxiety would creep back in, the familiar dread of being reduced to utility instead of humanity. But it didn't come. What came instead was curiosity. A genuine wondering about whether the changes I'd seen in Tyler, in my parents, in the small moments we'd shared over the past 2 years, were real and lasting or just temporary performances. On the 4th day I replied, I'll be there. I booked my flight and my hotel, not asking anyone to pick me up, not coordinating my arrival with anyone else's plans. I'd learned that independence wasn't rejection. It was protection. It was the difference between showing up whole and showing up hollow. When I landed in Phoenix, the heat wrapped around me like an old memory. I collected my rental car and drove through the city, watching familiar landmarks pass by. But this time I wasn't white-knuckling the steering wheel. I wasn't bracing for impact. I was just driving present and calm, knowing that whatever happened over the next 3 days I would be okay. The reunion was being held at a resort in North Scottsdale, a sprawling property with desert landscaping and casitas scattered across the property. I checked into my room, unpacked slowly, and stood on the small patio watching the sun descend toward the mountains. My phone buzzed. Tyler. Hey, you made it. No pressure, but we're all gathering by the pool at 6 if you want to stop by. Casual. Just family. I typed back. I'll be there. When I walked down to the pool area, I saw them before they saw me. Tyler and Jessica with their kids splashing in the shallow end. My parents sitting under an umbrella. My mother reading a book while my father scrolled through his phone. Amber and Craig at a table with drinks, laughing about something. They looked relaxed. Natural. Like a family in a commercial for resorts or retirement planning. Then, Tyler looked up and saw me. His face broke into a genuine smile. Marcus. He stood and walked over, extending his hand, then pulling me into a quick hug. Glad you came. Me too, I said, and meant it. My mother set her book down and came over. Her hug longer this time, less tentative. We've missed you, sweetheart. My father shook my hand firmly. Good to see you, son. You look well. Dubai's treating you right. It is, I said. Amber waved from her table and I waved back. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. We ate dinner together at the resort restaurant, conversations flowing naturally across topics that didn't require me to perform or prove anything. My father asked about my work, actually listened to the answers, asked follow-up questions that showed he'd retained what I'd told him before. My mother showed me photos on her phone of a garden she'd started, something she'd always wanted to do but never made time for. Tyler talked about the development project, now 6 months from completion, and how much he'd learned from the process. Not just about construction or business but about collaboration, about respecting expertise, about listening. At one point Amber leaned across the table. Marcus, I've been meaning to ask. Do you ever do consulting remotely? Craig's company is looking into sustainable infrastructure for their offices, and I thought of you. It was a small thing, but it was the first time she'd ever thought to connect me with an opportunity instead of asking me to provide one. I appreciate that, I said. Have him send me the details. I'd be happy to take a look. She smiled, something like pride in her expression. Cool. I'll do that. After dinner, as people dispersed to their rooms or back to the pool, Tyler pulled me aside. Can we walk for a minute? Sure. We walked the grounds in the cooling evening air, the resort lights casting soft glows across the pathways. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Tyler said, I'm really glad you came. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, I admitted. But I wanted to see if what we've been building is real. Tyler nodded. It is. At least it is for me. I know I can't speak for everyone, but I've been working on it. In therapy, actually. Jessica suggested it after everything that happened. You're in therapy? He laughed, a little embarrassed. Yeah. Turns out I had a lot of stuff to unpack. About control, about validation, about why I treated people the way I did. It's been hard. But good. I'm proud of you for that, I said. Takes guts to look at yourself honestly. He glanced at me. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you, Marcus. Really see you. Not just what you could do for me, but who you are. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know I mean it. I believe you, I said. And I'm choosing to trust that. One day at a time. We walked a bit further and Tyler said, you know what the weirdest part is? What? I'm actually happier now. Now that I'm not constantly scrambling for the next thing, the next deal, the next validation. It's like I was running so hard I forgot to notice I was empty. That resonated. I'd felt that same emptiness for years, trying to fill it with achievement and usefulness. Thinking if I just did enough I'd finally feel like I mattered. But mattering didn't come from doing. Came from being seen. And sometimes you had to teach people how to see you. Even if that meant walking away first. The next day was structured around activities. A golf outing in the morning that I skipped in favor of a solo hike in the McDowell Mountains. Lunch by the pool where I actually joined everyone. Sitting under an umbrella with a book. Occasionally glancing up to watch my niece and nephew play Marco Polo with their cousins. In the afternoon, there was a family meeting planned. Not the kind with agendas and resentments, but the kind where people actually talked. My mother had organized it, which surprised me. She'd never been one for direct emotional conversations, always preferring to smooth things over with pleasantries and deflection. But when we all gathered in one of the resort's meeting rooms, she stood up with a piece of paper in her hand, trembling slightly. I wanted to read something, she said. I've been working on this with my therapist. It's an apology. A real one. The room went quiet. She cleared her throat and began. To my children, but especially to Marcus. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the ways I failed you. Not just at that Christmas, but over years. I prioritized appearances over connection. I mistook your independence for not needing me, your competence for not deserving my attention. I made you feel invisible and I'm deeply sorry. Her voice broke, but she kept going. You deserved a mother who saw you, who celebrated you, who made space for you. And I didn't do that. I let you slip into the background because it was easier than confronting my own discomfort with emotional honesty. I can't undo that. But I want you to know I see it now. And I'm committed to doing better. She folded the paper and sat down. My father reached over and squeezed her hand. I felt something crack open in my chest, not painful but releasing, like pressure finally equalizing. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot. Tyler spoke next. I want to echo that. I've apologized before, but I want to say it again in front of everyone. Marcus, I took you for granted. I treated you like a resource instead of a person. And I'm sorry. I'm working every day to be better. And I hope you'll keep giving me chances to prove it. Amber raised her hand tentatively. Can I say something? Go ahead, my mother encouraged. Amber looked at me. I didn't get it before. I thought you were being dramatic walking out like that. But I've been thinking about how I've treated people in my own life, how I've used relationships transactionally without realizing it. And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. I should have. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. My father cleared his throat. I'm not great with words like your mother. But I want you to know I'm proud of you, Marcus. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for having the strength to set boundaries. You taught this family something important. That respect isn't optional. We sat there in that room, all of us, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something real. Not perfect, but real. Honest. Trying. That evening there was a barbecue. Casual, with string lights hung between palm trees and an acoustic guitarist playing soft background music. I stood near the grill with Tyler, watching him flip burgers with surprising competence. You know, he said, I used to think family was about loyalty, just showing up no matter what. But I've learned it's about respect. You can show up every day and still fail if you're not actually seeing people. I took a sip of my drink. That's true. And it's also about letting people leave when they need to and trusting they might come back when they're ready. He nodded. I'm glad you came back. Me, real ones. Funny memories. Embarrassing moments. Times we'd failed each other and times we'd shown up. At one point my niece climbed into my lap. Uncle Marcus, are you going to come visit us more? I glanced at Tyler, who was watching with a soft expression. Maybe, I said. If I'm invited. You're always invited, Tyler said. And he meant it. I flew back to Dubai 2 days later. But this time the departure felt different. Not like escape but like return. I was going back to the life I'd built, the city I'd chosen, the work that fulfilled me. But I was also leaving behind a family that was learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to actually be a family. Over the following months, things continued to shift. My mother called once a week, not to ask for anything, just to talk. My father sent articles he thought I'd find interesting, with little notes that showed he was actually reading about my field. Tyler and I collaborated on another project, this one even more successful than the first. And Amber reached out occasionally, not for favors but just to check in. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still moments of friction, still old patterns that crept back in. But the difference was that now, when those moments happened, we talked about them. We addressed them. We didn't pretend they didn't exist. I'd learned that healing wasn't linear. It was messy and slow and required constant effort from everyone involved. But it was possible. Not because people magically changed overnight, but because enough people decided the work was worth it. Years later, I stood in that same resort in Scottsdale for another family gathering. This time it was for Tyler and Jessica's 15th anniversary. The development project I'd consulted on had become a landmark. My parents had retired and were traveling, finally enjoying life instead of just managing it. Amber had started her own business, something she was genuinely passionate about. And me, I was still in Dubai, still doing work I loved, still building a life that felt authentically mine. But I was also here, standing with my family, feeling like I actually belonged. Not because I'd shrunk to fit their expectations, but because they'd expanded to make room for me. At the anniversary dinner, Tyler stood to make a toast. He raised his glass and looked around the table. To family, he said. Not the idea of it, but the reality. The messy, complicated, imperfect reality that requires us to actually see each other. To respect each other. To do the hard work of showing up honestly. He turned to me. And to Marcus, who taught us what that looks like. Who showed us that boundaries aren't walls, they're foundations. Thank you for not giving up on us even when we gave you every reason to. Everyone raised their glasses. I felt my mother's hand on my shoulder. My father's proud nod. Amber's genuine smile. And I realized something. I hadn't just survived that Christmas on the floor. I transformed it. I'd taken the worst moment of invisibility and turned it into the catalyst for being seen. Not by demanding it, but by refusing to accept anything less. The people who made me sit on the floor didn't get to define my story. I did. And my story wasn't about revenge or resentment. It was about resilience. about knowing my worth when others couldn't see it, about walking away when I needed to and walking back when I was ready, about building the life and the relationships I actually deserved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.